Welcome back to 6th grade orchestra. Today we are going to learn about dynamics. Your book talks about dynamics on page 42. Dynamics is our fancy music word for just saying how loud or soft we're playing. There's a lot of different levels of dynamics, but right now we're just going to learn the fancy Italian words for loud and soft. So when we want to talk about playing loud and music and want to use our fancy Italian word as music does, we are going to call it forte. It's also, if you know other Romance languages, you might think forte sounds like the word for strong, or it sounds similar to the word for strong in other languages. In our music, we're going to abbreviate that with an F. So if you see the F under your music, it just means play loud. The word for soft is piano, and we're going to abbreviate that with just the letter P. Usually when you see these F's or P's in your music, they look kind of slanty or italicized. That also helps you know that they are dynamic markings. This word piano is probably pretty familiar to most of you because we have an instrument called the piano. The full name for the piano, the instrument, is actually the forte piano. It was called that because it was one of the first keyboard instruments that could play both loud and soft. So before then, keyboard instruments would often have things that plucked the strings and it didn't have a lot of volume contrast. But once they figured out the new felt hammer system that our current modern piano uses, you can play both loud and soft on the piano. So they came up with the name forte piano. So if you recognize the word piano, that is where the name of the instrument actually comes from, because the piano can play both loud and soft. On our instruments, there's three main ways we can do this. We're going to mainly focus on one of them. The main way that we can play loud or soft is just how much pressure we use. So if we use more weight from our arms, it makes it louder. If I use less weight from my arm, it makes it softer, or piano. So you can experiment with that. Experiment how much weight can you relax. We never want to think about pushing into the string. That can create shoulder tension. But how much weight from my arm can I relax into the string to play loud? And then how much of that weight can I let off while still having good tone? For most of you, that will be enough to experiment with. However, I know I have some overachievers out there, so I'm going to talk about the other two ways we can change our volume. The next way, so we have pressure. The next way is our bow speed. So if I have faster bow, that creates more friction and makes my tone louder. If I use the same weight but use a slower bow, it makes it softer. That's another thing you can experiment with. You'll notice the tone color is a little bit different than it was when I used pressure. The third way we call our contact point, and that is, where is my bow hitting the string? Up until now, we've talked about how our bow should be halfway in between. That's a really good place to just get nice medium solid tone. If I want less volume, I can back my bow away from the bridge, closer to the fingerboard, to play soft. If I want it louder, I can move my bow closer to the bridge. Now, to some of you it might sound the same. To some of you though, you might hear that my different types of loud sound a little bit different when I'm using pressure, when I'm using speed, and when I'm using contact point. They're pretty similar, but they're slightly different. So again, for most of you, just start seeing how well you can control how much weight you put into the string. For those of you that want more of a challenge and want to get to know your instrument a little bit more, play around with some of those different techniques to see what you can do. In number 181 in your books, you are just alternating between playing loud, forte with our F, or playing soft, piano with the P. Let's try 181 together, experimenting with using weight to change our volume. Here we go. as you get comfortable with 181, start looking through the concert pieces in your folder. Some of you have asked me before what these letters means, and now you can start applying them to your music. Sometimes you might see other things added in addition to the letters. If you ever see the letter N in front of a letter, that stands for mezzo. That is medium. So I would have mezzo forte is medium loud. If I had a mezzo piano, it would be medium soft. The other thing I can do is I can add another of the same letter. So if I had two Fs, instead of just forte, I would add issimo. So I could say it's fortissimo, and that's like extra loud. If I had three Fs, it would be fortissimo. If I had four Fs, it'd be fortissimo. So I can just keep adding extra letters to make it extra loud or extra soft. So if you see multiple Fs in your music or multiple Ps, it's just saying do it even more extreme than you would normally would. The last thing that you have in your music, in your concert music, that might be related to dynamics is something called an accent. So when you have your note, if you have a little sideways V over the note, we're going to call that an accent. And when we have an accent in our music, it just means it wants that note to be extra strong. So sometimes you might see that like that the last note of the piece. So instead of changing the letter dynamic marking for just one note, it might just put an accent on the note to say that one note needs to be extra strong, a little bit louder or sharper sounding than the other notes. So enjoy experimenting with playing loud and soft in a beautiful musical way, hopefully, on your instruments and applying these new ideas to the concert pieces you already have.